Hello and welcome. Hi, Merletta. How are you?
Awesome. How are you doing?
Doing well. Okay, so we have an agenda. We're going to talk about risk management. Why is it important? We're going to talk about the five disciplines of risk management, and we'll also discuss some takeaways, helpful hints, and we'll try to field some questions and maybe we'll have some answers. Merletta, take it away.
When we talk about what is risk management, I don't think that requires a lot of explanation because if you're a business owner or if you're a management team or what, you're already thinking about it. This is the stuff that you think about during the day. This is the stuff that sometimes keeps you up at night. And so, really, what we're talking about is taking what you're already thinking about and putting some form and function around it. We're talking about putting some process around managing risk in your business and in your operations. So we take the hand wringing out of it. That's what we're talking about.
No argument. Yeah. So let's talk about the importance of this and how it impacts businesses, organizations, and what the focus really should be once you get past that governance piece. So, risk management, it's important because if you do not correctly identify and understand what the risks are, it's going to kill business operations. It is going to impact the decisions by leadership and it will truly impact your employees as they are working through different things.
Let's take it one step further. In the risk management process, we all know that we recognize in our business operations or in our process, there's a risk. And then we think about how do we try and solve them? But if we take it one more question is how much am I going to spend to solve it? And so the risk management process not only identifies the problem, but it identifies the value of the problem. It identifies the cost of the remediation. And probably one of the most important things that a risk management process does is it helps you define an asset. And boy, I'll tell you, when you start talking to people about what's an asset, and you get past workstations and servers, that can be a lively discussion. But in the risk management process, if your CEO fell off a cliff, how much would that cost you? And what's your remediation plan to manage all of those functions if that person is, for some reason, abruptly unavailable? Or what if you have a manufacturing or a production manager who's got a bunch of processes in his head, and all of a sudden he is abruptly unavailable and he's the only one that knows how to fix X machine. This really is the process of understanding those risks that keep you up at night and all the pieces and parts that go into those risks and how we mitigate those things, even reaching beyond the walls into supply chain and what's going on outside in your industry. And that's why a lot of times, Nick, I think that we skip over this because it's a huge conversation. And it's not a conversation we can have in one or two meetings. This is part of your this is part of your security culture. This is, in many respects, the tip of your sword. Because when you understand this, you understand what to do.
I agree. Yeah. Let's dig in. Let's hit the next slide here then and start talking about the five disciplines of risk management. And so let's go ahead and hit that. So identification and Merletta, you were just talking about that, right? How do you identify a risk? Like, let's start about that. Let's start with that asset management. And I want to talk about intellectual property. I want to talk about proprietary information. I want to talk about trade secrets. These are all things that most organizations, most businesses, you have something of that. It might not be trade secrets, but it's definitely proprietary information. It might be intellectual property. What is the risk to that? And how is that defined actually as an asset, right? That could be documentation. Merletta, you just mentioned, and I was laughing. I had somebody say that duct tape was an asset. Um, And so I was thinking about that because I started laughing. I was like, I don't know. That's not really critical to information security. But then you mentioned, hey, what if the CEO of a company falls off a cliff? Duct tape would be very useful, actually, to
Indeed.
keep the CEO. Yeah, the wall, the paint on the wall is going to be, but hey, you could duct tape them to the wall, and then we've saved an asset, right? So in the meantime, though, if the CEO does contain all of the key trails to the intellectual property for an organization and it is not documented, or you have that person in operations who actually understands and has helped develop out what is considered a trade secret that we don't want, I don't know, other countries finding out about that information. They are now a key asset, and we now have to identify the risk associated with that asset. So please jump in.
When I think you bring up something really important, because one of the things I think it's important to repeat over and over again, two main points. First of all, security is a team sport. And a lot of times, what we see is when we start talking about risk management, we're going to relegate that to X, to this department, or to this person, depending upon the size of your business or your operation. And nobody can do risk management in a vacuum because risk is something that affects every segment of, of what you're doing. And the other thing I think that's really important is you can't properly have a risk management discussion without the executive team. And you have to start there and get that charter and get that conversation from the executive team because this isn't just about what's on your servers or your workstations. This is, again, a reminder how information systems have become so pervasive in everything we do that it touches all aspects of operation, now internal and external. And so that's why we often see this coming up in this space because we're dealing with these pervasive systems. And we have to have executive sponsorship to get the cooperation of the whole organization to properly assess and mitigate the risk that's going on.
I agree, and that actually flows into number 2, that flows into the risk measurement and assessment, and also flows into some shameless self-advertising. Nice to have a chief information security officer because you talk to that executive team, they truly help actually identify what truly is critical for the organization. Then as you start doing that, you really need to have somebody coming in and measuring and helping the organization to correctly assess several different things for each one of those, but if your risk to something is very important and you go and buy a system to protect something that's not important, that's where that measurement and assessment truly comes in. It helps, it levels the playing field. It's nice for cyber liability insurance to require a bunch of different systems. I agree with those systems. They're usually best practices. But if those systems are not protecting the correct risks or the correct assets that have the highest level of risk, that's not really helping us very much. It actually doesn't help the insurance company either, right? That's supposed to be very much about risk transference. And so those questionnaires we get, it really is about measuring your systems, your information security program, and trying to figure out if you are measuring your own assets and measuring the risks associated with your assets. Yeah, thank you. I that was perfect, Merlin. I love flowing into shameless advertising while we're talking. Yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
this is the universal language.
Mhm.
And I think this is where a lot of times this conversation is what bridges the gap between management and operations. Operations can tell you all kinds of metrics about what they're doing, but management isn't sitting out there. Those things really don't have context for them. It is in the identification and the mitigation and the valuation of risk that we create the universal conversation that's not only meaningful to our executive management team, but also meaningful to the outside, to, like you said, cyber insurance and so on and so forth. And you know what's really, I'll give you an example of kind of what you were talking about. I have had a client for years, and they're a manufacturing client, and they are a subcontractor to a very large prime contractor with the DoD. So we have to do a lot of process evaluation and stuff for them. They have this old machine sitting in the back of their shop that does this very specific thing, and it would cost over 100 grand to replace that. That's no joke. And it wouldn't operate the same. That machine is hooked up to a PC that's running a virtual machine of, I think, Windows Vista. And we had to put it in a virtual machine to protect it. And of course, it only talks to this piece of equipment. It's not on the network. But I've had twice to have to go in and tell the IT operations people, no, you can't replace that. And helping them understand that there's value associated with it isn't just a common assessment from a technical standpoint. And that's really and that's really why this is such a pervasive conversation, because you have to understand the vertical, you have to understand the operations, you have to understand the workflow of a business, you have to understand how a business makes money. You have to understand a lot in order for this to be meaningful.
Mhm.
And things are not necessarily what they appear.
I agree. In talking about number 3, this risk mitigation. So if we're going to talk about the technical thing, we want to mitigate the risk to that system that we can't get rid of. It is critical to the operations of the organization. Somebody from tech might look at it and say, what we do is we isolate that on its own network, right? Put that over on its own network. You isolate it with a firewall, you isolate it with a subnet, something like that. And that way you don't have the risk of additional traffic or other devices on the same network finding it or interfering with it. I look at it though, and I risk mitigation. One of the healthy parts of my relationship and my family is that my wife and I always have coffee. Okay. So how do we mitigate the risk of running out of coffee? We usually order the filters ahead. We order the coffee ahead. We have friends that send us very good coffee so that we have it on hand. Those are all things that help mitigate that. However, we did run into a rather scary situation not too long ago. The coffee used to be up in the pantry in a basket in the dark. And it made it tough to actually figure out, did we have enough filters? Did we have enough coffee? And my wife, love her, but she stuck hot chocolate in the coffee basket. And so I was operating under the assumption that we had more coffee. So here we are. We haven't measured it correctly. We've got stuff in the dark. How do I mitigate this risk here? Because we almost ran out of coffee, and all hell would have brought. We're done. That would have been what it was. So interesting enough, all the coffee got moved somewhere
It's
else.
work stoppage, man.
It is. It'll stop
Gets
everything.
you down.
Nobody's doing anything. There will be fighting. The streets will be littered with remains of I don't know yet. We can't even quantify this. So we isolate the coffee, we move it somewhere else. We put it in a very special spot. I bought a very expensive safe. No, that's not true. That's not true. But it's all been moved, right? And yes, I see somebody's already made a comment. I feel the coffee pain. I agree with you, right? But that's again, I just want to simplify the concepts behind this because hey, there's a risk to our coffee. Now, think of an organization where you might have something, and Merletta, you mentioned it might cost 6 figures to replace a single system, but that single system might be worth millions upon millions of dollars. Who is going in and correctly assessing how to save that and lower the amount of risk to the organization? And that's really what risk mitigation is about. And now we should get into the reporting, Merletta. What do you think?
It's the whole adage of if it's not on paper, it doesn't exist. And so you have to have a way to really document this, but it's not one and done. This is something that we go back to sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly. This is a living, breathing, ever changing process. And what seems like a very small change, like maybe your IT group changed a tool in their tool stack, it can have a big ripple effect. And
Mhm.
so this is something that we constantly are watching, which is why there needs to be not just a guy, there needs to be a group that meets on a regular basis to review this. And it needs to be a multidisciplinary group because all of this impacts every segment of your organization. Again, I can't say it enough. This information, understanding this, managing this, is how business decisions are made. It is the tip of your sword.
And I want to talk. I want to piggyback on that and talk about knowledge transfer. So bringing it back to what, in this case, Merletta, you keep talking about we really need security culture. We need a team sport here. We need knowledge. And interestingly enough, having somebody dedicated and devoted towards this actually makes a very high impact on how an organization makes decisions. A virtual chief information officer or simply a CIO, their job is to make sure things are running. They want to make sure things are running, that the organization is functional. This is key, right? That is key operational task for any CIO. In direct contrast, a chief information security officer is truly trying to make sure everything's protected and they are trying to lower the risk to the business while making sure that the business still runs. And so there has to be knowledge transfer. You don't have to know everything that we know. Okay. We do not have to discuss the Caesar cipher. I just wanted to talk about it because I haven't eaten lunch yet and the Caesar salad sounds good. Right. But in the meantime, there has to be some knowledge transfer from somebody in charge of information security. And the reason why is, and it goes to on number 4 here on our list, risk reporting. Somebody has to interpret the data correctly. If you give it to a CIO, and by the way, I'm not picking on CIOs, I'm not picking on BCIOs. We're talking about somebody who's consistently reporting on, do we have things running? What do we need to improve? How do we improve it to make things work? You have to have somebody else looking at some of the same data and then also looking at other data and looking at different departments because it's not all just IT. We don't focus on just it is a segment of an organization when you're identifying risk. And I'm looking at the who's monitoring this. If you're monitoring a system and you want to report out of that system, yes, the CIO might want that, but you may actually want a different report going to the CISO, or they may need something else that's actually sending them reports that a CIO is not interested in. And that's okay.
And I think you make a good point because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier of the pervasive nature of information systems. Yes, the IT department is managing those systems, but the production, the input, the output, the operational status, all of those things are impacting all of the other aspects of your business. And you can't just contain this conversation to IT because IT may be putting controls in place, but the impact of those is rippling out into every corner of the organization and even externally to your supply chain and suppliers and how information moves between you and vendors and customers and things like that. That understanding of how pervasive these systems are and the impact they have on every single person that works for you is critical to risk management, to understanding how to properly go through this process and how to properly manage it. So it's a differentiator and
Mhm.
it's a benefit to your organization because And when
Yeah, I want to send some love to some departments that do not always get discussed during IT webinars. Let's talk human resources. Let's talk accounting. I don't know. They manage some really important processes and operations to an organization. And while a lot of our colleagues will say that the most important thing to an organization is without a doubt the computers and the servers and the cloud systems provided, the most important part is usually the personnel, the people that make up an organization. And this is again go looking at and bouncing off of what you just said. Yeah, we have to know about those other departments. We have to know what they're doing, not because we want to control what they're doing, but we need to have a heartbeat on that situation. I see a question popped up. What format do you use for reporting and monitoring risk? Merletta, you want to take a stab at that first?
it's an evolution. I have clients that do it in a spreadsheet and they have risks and they score it and they identify those things and that serves them. You get to a point where you need something a little more capable than that. And so there are multiple platforms you can use out there for risk management. There are some that are industry specific. The financial industry has some really specific information they want reported. And just like anything else, there's multiple tools out there you can use, or you can do something internally. But I will tell you, it's becoming more and more prevalent in security practices. So I think we will see more and more questions on security surveys, on insurance renewals. Uh, do you actually have risks that you manage? Do you actually have a risk management roster? Do you have a method or a practice or a policy by which you review it? How often do you review it? And I think this is the snowball coming down the hill in that the DoD kind of drives through CMMC a lot of the security practices. And then what we see is the commercial market pick up NIST and say, oh, that looks pretty good. I'm going to implement that into what I'm doing. So the DoD is what's driving this in the defense industrial complex. I think what we're going to see is insurance is going to drive this in the private sector. And when you look at many insurance renewals, which are now 5, 6 pages long, they're NIST. That's what they are. And so this is, I think, a timely topic in that I think that insurers, primes, the government are just getting more sophisticated about it's not just enough to put some controls in place. There is a method and there is a culture that needs to be in place because we can't just put a technical tool bubble around people and make them safe. It just doesn't work that way. And people are starting to figure that out.
I agree. Yeah, I want to dive in a little bit more on how we separate out format on risk. So one thing, and Merletta, you were already talking about it a little bit anyway, but you can separate it out by different industries. We already started with contracting, government contracting. You have a system security plan of action and
Okay.
milestones that sometimes follows along with that. You have to submit an SBRS score, which actually provides a number essentially that you're reporting on yourself. That requires you to review your own security program and review your own organization. In the meantime, a format for healthcare would be an annual security risk assessment. Oftentimes there's confusion because you're required to do your own security risk assessment, which again, there are tools that you can grab and actually perform that as an organization internally. vCISOs do that. We use those tools that are inherent to healthcare for those clients that meet those requirements. And then, oh, by the way, you're also supposed to have a third party security risk assessment. But that third party security risk assessment, one of the first questions we get is, do you do this internally? Do you have a risk register? How do you measure that? Who reads it? Who reviews it? So you have that. I wanted to call out another industry. You already mentioned finance, banking. You have examinations that come in, and oftentimes banks will go out and purchase a system where they are consistently maintaining and documenting different risks. And they often have to go in there and tweak and figure out how to do this, that, or the other thing, or maybe this does not apply because our core systems are actually cloud based. So there's a bunch of different things that they do, but they're required to have an information security officer who goes in and manages that. So the point, and sorry, because I'm actually probably a little bit more long winded at this point on this, but the simple truth is the format is defined by which industry you are in, is defined by the needs of the organization. And of course, it's defined by who is actually there to convert it into something that leadership will A, read, B, want to understand. Because, by the way, knocking on the door and saying, hey, let's talk about risk is not something I don't think anybody really wants to talk about most
It's not
days.
sexy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that format is usually determined by the industry and the organization within the industry and how they're working through different things. But standards include security risk assessments, risk registers, vulnerability management reports are another one. Reports out of managed endpoint detection response and endpoint detection response. And by the way, in case you're wondering, you can have both. Endpoint detection response is software that's reporting. It's the new word for antivirus, right? Managed endpoint detection response is usually seen as something fully supported by a 24/7 SOC, security operations center. That's all. There's so many, it's this huge mass of different things that you can do. And that's actually one of the reasons why Merlin and I are here. And we like to do what we do because we like to sift through all of that and figure out how we translate that to a leadership team.
And I think, and I know we're getting short on time here, but I think that it's important to understand that this looks different for different businesses. You have to do what makes sense. And again, I have to fall back on your security program, your security platform should be a differentiator. It should propel your business forward. It should be something that you're putting out there and saying, hey, we're secure and we know it. And here's how we know it. And it should be something that's helping you drive your business, bring in new business. It should be an ad, not just this crazy, mysterious expense that keeps popping up that you don't know what to do with. And that's why I do what I do, is because this should be a value add. And that's what we want to make it. And that's our rule.
Yeah, I was asked earlier today about this, and my response has been recently, I can help you do one or two of two things. I can help you make money, I can help you save money, or I can help you do both. And it
Indeed.
depends on your industry, it depends on your needs as a business, but ultimately, we're here to drive an organization forward in a safe way. And that kind of feeds right into line number 5, which we've really been touching on that this entire time, but risk governance, Roletta, you nailed it, right? Driving the organization forward. You know your risks, you make better decisions.
Well, not only that, but it is culture. And it is being aware that this isn't just a bump in the road we need to manage right now. This is moving forward. This is business. This is not going away. And it's something we need to embrace and we need to adopt and we need to make it a value add. And all of that is absolutely doable. It's just, it, it is culture and it is a way of thinking moving forward.
Love it. All right, what do we have on the next slide? I forgot. We've been having so much fun here. Yeah, Q&A. Do we have any other questions that we can currently work through and discuss?
Well, Nick, I don't see anything in the chat, but I got a couple that are coming to mind here. By the way, this is Carl Kaiser, the content manager here at Integris. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, but that's okay. I'm the man behind the curtain, I guess. When people get on the topic of risk, from my experience, and you've made mention of it here, it's almost like a dirty word when it comes up because people don't want to think about the nasty, scary things that might come out of the woodwork and eat their business alive. What are some ways the two of you have found over the years to alleviate that fear?
Oh, go ahead, Merletta.
I would say, first of all, Carl, whether people want to think about it or not, they already are. And it's really a matter of you're already thinking about it. You're already concerned about it. We offer you a way to do something about it. And so, you know, cybersecurity and building a security platform is a multidisciplinary team sport. And I think a lot of times, especially in the small and mid-sized business market, the small business owner, and I've never met a small business owner that didn't want to reduce, defer, mitigate, or eliminate risk. Never met one that wasn't interested in that. Now, that elimination, that last one, that's an elusive cat right there. I don't know. I don't know how effectively. And if somebody's telling you they can eliminate your risk, I want to meet them. But the others, we have ways to deal with that. We have ways to reduce and make manageable the risk that you have. And really, it's an equation. Does the risk cost me more than the remediation? Does the remediation cost me more than the risk? That's really, this is a business conversation, not a technical conversation. And I think that's what we bring to it, Carl, is context and a way to really determine how you want to take care of it that makes business sense and not just by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, I always start whenever I have a new client and I start working with their business. One of my first questions is always the same: do you have insurance? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. Usually it's a yes. The next question is, do you know what it's for? Because the answer is usually it means mitigation or it means we have we're done. We've reduced our risk. You haven't done any of those. You're transferring the risk, right? If something happens, you have insurance because you do not want to keep thousands or millions of dollars somewhere at a bank that you can't touch just in case you have a security incident. So that's risk transference. And that's often something that's misunderstood by leadership team. Hey, we have insurance. We don't really need anything else with our information security program for risk. We are good. And Roletta, you mentioned it earlier. There are all these questions, right? Insurance is driving this. Insurance is driving it because they're looking at going, bro, we are the transference here. You're trying to transfer your risk onto us. Are you doing enough that it's actually feasible for us to actually help you and partner with you on this? And that's where we come in and we look at the organization and go, hey, that's great that you got insurance, but can we discuss how best to lower your need to use them? And that's usually highly impactful. Go ahead, Marlena.
And can we qualify that you actually qualify for coverage? Because even if you have a policy, that doesn't necessarily mean you're covered for all things at all levels.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I know I
No, you're
interrupted.
okay. Interesting enough, there is a risk to your insurance too, and this is also something that's skipped over. You have all these requirements that come down, and from time to time, we'll see where we have a new organization coming in. Somebody filled out a questionnaire and said, "Yes, we have this, and yes, we have this, and yes, we have this." And then we're having a discussion. We're going, "Your interpretation on that is actually not what the insurance company is going to say if you have a security incident." And in the meantime, you work in an industry where you are required to have insurance. So if you lose your insurance, you can lose business. If you lose the business coming in, your organization stops being able to function. That's one of the big things that we see moving forward with how to figure out how to limit that risk. The other thing is when we install information security programs, on average, I see that the insurance premiums do not go up as high. If you don't have an information security program or you do have a security incident, you can have anywhere from 25 to even 40% increase to your premium. In the meantime, our clients might have a minor increase under 10%. They may have no increase, or in some cases, they may have a drop in the cost of the premium because they have enough in place to really limit and reduce risk.
But it also maintains their insurability.
Yep. No argument. I see we got a question in here. What is a reasonable cadence to evaluate risk ongoing? And should that cadence change based on the volatility of the business? Ooh, Marletta. I really want to take this one, but I just talked. Go ahead.
I think that a reasonable cadence to evaluate ongoing risk is at minimum quarterly. Depending upon the volatility of the business, it may be monthly, or you may have some special project or something going on that we're evaluating it weekly. It just depends what's going on. This is an ebb and flow, and we look at what risks we're managing and what's going on and make a decision about what we need to do. I think at minimum, the executive team, the risk management team that includes your executive members, you have to meet at least quarterly to review that. You may have sub teams within that are managing like operational risk or IT risk or HR risk or whatever, and they may meet more frequently. I think it's just a matter of your charter, how you organize the team, who's empowered to do what, who's empowered to make decisions, and at what level are they empowered to make them. I think all of that is part of what you define in your charter, and that kind of sets up the cadence that organization needs to continue to evaluate risk.
Now, Marlette, you're talking quarterly, you're talking weekly. Aren't we supposed to be doing work? Are we supposed to be working? Right. So, what's a good cadence for reporting on this versus the actual risk evaluation? How do you think that can be done in a way so that we're not necessarily interrupting operations?
If you have a viable risk register, you can do a lot of maintenance through that. And so that may reduce the amount of time you need to spend around a table and actually in a meeting, but it doesn't eliminate it. It doesn't, and I still, and at minimum, I just feel strongly about that. And maybe you're using your risk register, but this is a conversation.
Mhm.
And this is a conversation between an interdisciplinary team. I can't decide as an IT person how my actions are affecting operations or HR or sales. It's a conversation, and it is what keeps operations going.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just don't know how to say it. This is the tip of your sword.
Mhm.
This is what keeps you in front of what's going on in your business, in your industry, in your supply chain. This is what keeps you aware and viable. And these are the conversations that are meaningful to help you not only keep things as they are currently, but propel you forward. So clearly, I feel pretty strongly about it.
I'm catching a little bit of that. Yeah, I'm no, I'm in full agreement. And I think just to answer this question, the cadence itself really should truly be a conversation, a regular conversation with key resources in an organization. How do you report it? You report it at least through if there are changes, you report it through however your change management is set up. You report it through communications to others that need to know. And then finally, that annual internal security risk assessment. That's a great way to snapshot. Now, doesn't that sounds better, right, than quarterly? But at the same time, the quarterly is a conversation. Security risk assessment is a singular report that can, if done right internally, transcend and map out how risk has gone either as a spot check or even during a specific amount of time.
Well,
And this is
it concatenates all of that information together. And so it's a reflection on an annual basis of the effort that you've put in all year.
I agree, and that's one of the reasons why it's nice to have a virtual chief information security officer, often partnered with either the vCIO or CIO. Same thing with the CISO being partnered. That they're able to do that. They're able to pull the information and data and the objectives that the infrastructure and IT side is looking at, and use that to also help map out, just from the technology standpoint, where risk is going. In the meantime, we're pulling from the other departments, right? We're pulling from HR, we're pulling from accounting, we're pulling from operations, all kinds of different places to truly give a good picture of where risk is in an organization.
Indeed.
Carl, do
Nothing
you have
that's
any
coming
other questions?
across.
I would.
I think that we've covered a lot of great stuff today. I would love to hear people's feedback on that. I think that we had a great conversation today. I would love to see us make this more of a regular thing that is more conversational, where we're talking about things rather than lecturing about things. Otherwise, I think we're good.
Well, on our next webinar, we ought to give a participation prize, like a
We could
Buffalo
do that.
plaid shirt or
We could
something.
do that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm, you do.
Because you got to
You
earn
get
these.
those when you get that CISSP certification, they give you one of those shirts. And the longer you've got it, the smaller the checks get. But you're going to see
I
somebody
like
that
it.
their shirt, it might look red, but it's not. They're little, just tiny black checks. They've dedicated a tremendous amount of their life to what they're doing. Without that, I think we can end the stream. I want to thank everybody for coming on, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.